Welcome to Easy Peasy Books, From Author to Authority, the lively and engaging podcast for business professionals who've always believed they have a book in them. I'm your host, Gillian Whitney. Join me as I chat with authors and industry experts from all around the world to explore simple strategies to write, publish, and leverage your business book. Whether you're an entrepreneur, executive, or an employee, this podcast is for you. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Easy Peasy Books podcast. Today, I have a new friend in the house who we met through a mutual acquaintance, Jihan Haridi Adornowski. Hope I got that right. And it's lovely to meet you, Orly. Can you, before we get stuck in, can you tell people who you are and what you do? And then we'll start talking about your author's journey.
Absolutely. First of all, Gillian, thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to our conversation. I say, the way I introduce myself is I say, I have one superpower. I make fuzzy clear, which is why I call myself a facilitator of lightbulb moments. I help early stage small businesses when they're ready to scale, look at their brand from kind of a big picture perspective. And I help them literally get clear on who they are, who they serve, what those people get, and then develop the messaging that's going to help them cut through the noise of the tens of thousands of daily messages so they can stand out and attract their ideal clients.
Perfect. I love that. And it's always good to always have that marketing hat because we need that so much, especially when you're an author. And so you are in the process of kind of like home stretch of your second book. And I really want to focus a lot on that today. But let's just backtrack for a second because I always think it's interesting when someone is not a first-time author. They're, once you've done one book, I always liken it to eating potato chips. You're just like, okay, I got to do another one. We get these wonderful ideas. But I always think it's interesting to look at somebody's author journey in terms of where they started and where they're going next. And so your first book was Ready, Launch, Brand. Hope I got that title right. And that was about marketing for startups. So you went the traditional publishing route with that one, with a real, not self-published, you actually had a publisher. So you want to tell us a little bit about that book as background for the rest of our discussion?
Yeah. So basically the concept behind that first book was twofold. On the one hand, I was really looking at lean marketing principles. Well, this is 5 years ago, so it was still, I don't think a lot of people were talking about it then. And then really differentiate traditional marketing from lean marketing and why lean marketing is the way to go for startups and why traditional marketing is way too expensive and also doesn't work for startups because traditional marketing is meant to remind people who you are and what you do. And when you're a startup, nobody knows who you are. So it's expensive and it actually doesn't work. And so working with a traditional publisher, this was my first foray into publishing. I'm not going to name the publisher because I ended up working with an imprint. And I have to say, I would say to your listeners, make sure you do a lot of research because it turned out that they really were not interested in promoting my book in any way, shape, or form. The book was endorsed by Seth Godin, and they refused to stop the presses long enough to put the endorsement on the back of the book.
Wow. So what a marketing miss.
Exactly. I mean, it's on the website, but who cares? The book doesn't have it. And even when I had somebody who was interested in buying a bulk, a lot of books, they still wouldn't do it. So that was pretty shocking to me. So, but the idea, it's funny because working on that book, I realized like I'm very much in the entrepreneurship space. And I think I had shared with you, my dad was an entrepreneur. I come from a long line of entrepreneurs on my father's side. And anyway, and he struggled. to be successful. And so this book kind of came out of that experience for me as the daughter of an entrepreneur.
Oh, that's very cool. That's very cool. And I have to tell you, I'm a huge, huge Seth Godin fan. So Nosy Parker Gillian wants to know, how on earth did you get Seth Godin to endorse your book? Because that's I thought that's just like a great story. What's that about?
I asked him. Remember, this is right. So the book came out, it was supposed to come out in 2020. Clearly that did not happen since everything shut down. And Seth Godin had actually opened up his master class during the pandemic, and I attended. I got to not meet him in person. Obviously, this is all virtual. And when the manuscript, and I had actually I had quoted him in my book, as I had a bunch of other people as well who I really respected. And so when the manuscript was done, I literally just reached out to him, and if it's possible to genuflect on email, that is what I was doing. Literally just saying, "Oh my God, it would mean the world to me." Anyway, he responded right away, and he was he was so gracious. And he wrote the loveliest review. I was just really floored. To this day, I like get teary-eyed when I think about it, because it was so amazing, like, that he would say yes to me. Maybe he remembered me from the master class, I don't know, but in any case, he was wonderful, and I have nothing but good things to say about him.
Oh, amazing, amazing. And you know what? He's just kind of one of those people that it's like, I've always thought, I bet you he is who he is in real life. Like,
Yes.
some people have their, oh, this is my public persona, but, behind the scenes, I'm a jerk. And a Seth Godin to me just kind of always feels like that man resonates on so many levels of just being the most gracious person who's walking the planet.
I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, it was, I mean, I literally cried when he said yes, and when I saw what he wrote, it was just like, oh my gosh.
That's nice, that's nice. That's beautiful. So thank you for sharing that. I was just being nosy, but I had to ask.
Oh,
So
no, that's fine.
so let's shift gears. So you've been successful with your first book. It did well. It's on Amazon, it's great. And I suppose that's something that, like, even just a solopreneur, like, you don't have to be a startup business. It's like anybody who's into lean marketing, a bootstrapper business person can benefit from that. So I love that. So shifting gears to your new book that you're in the process, home stretch with. So first of all, tell us the title. And I love this one because it's about women in visibility. So share a little bit about this.
So the name of the book is Why Not Me? The Female Guide for Entrepreneurship. I interviewed 44 women across the country, across many industries, parts of the world as well. So I had somebody Northern Ireland, the UK, Israel. I think there were and one woman who, this is wild. She, as a financial person, brilliant, brilliant woman, and she splits her time between Berlin and Dubai.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
very interesting stories, and the idea behind the book, and, I think that's been germinating for me since I was a child. So, this idea that, women's voices are rarely really heard,
Mm.
and even when we are at the table, we're kind of quieted. And it's a very common experience for women, especially in corporate, where women say something and a man will say the exact same thing, and that's where, and that's what's being heard. So, but the idea behind the book was, I wanted to really explore what the challenge, what it's like, really. Is it really true that for women, it's a very different experience, right? So I've actually taught in entrepreneurship programs. I've judged pitch competitions. I'm a mentor for a founder institute, which is an international organization. So I've met lots of entrepreneurs, and I've taught courses, for entrepreneurship students. And my own experience has been that it's a lot more men than women. And when I taught a course, mostly men, and the women who were in the minority were rarely heard. And so, this idea has just kind of stuck in my brain of like, what does that look like? And so the book is literally built around the challenges that women experience in launching and growing their business. And you will not be surprised to hear that the two longest chapters have to do with money. One is on how we do not charge enough, and I have a whole lot of information around that and why we don't do it. Some of it has to do with our a high level of empathy that women have. Um, Turns out I looked at brain science, and turns out that with female brains actually are more empathic than male brains. Not like a lot, but enough that what tends to happen, and I know this is a common experience for every woman I've ever talked to, is that we tend to think first about the other person, and which is a wonderful thing. And I think it's partly due why moms, there's the whole mom piece. And by the way, more than half of the women I interviewed are moms. So
Mm.
mompreneurs are also at the core of this book, and how what it looks like, for moms raising small children, launching a business, and doing all the other things, right? So every woman, again, and this is a common experience. I'll give you one example of woman who, this is a woman in Northern Ireland. I think she has 3 kids under the age, I want to say under the age of 9. She had a full-time job, and she was launching her business all at the same time. And the title actually comes from her, because she said to me during the interview, I kept thinking, why me? Why me? Like, who am I to do this? And finally I said, why not me? I'm like, oh my God, that's the title of the book.
I love that.
It's right. And it's something that most women, in fact, every woman I interviewed struggles with, the imposter syndrome. And this idea, it's not just that they don't think they're enough, it's that they think they need more. So almost
Mm.
so many of women entrepreneurs have multiple degrees. They've got these certificates. They've graduated from these Ivy League programs. They've done all this stuff. And still, the first thing is, gee, maybe I need more. I need
Mm.
more education. I need more certificates, more, letters after my name. And it's an interesting thing. Anyway, I was saying about the 2 chapters being the longest. The second one is, of course, our lack of funding. And
Oh, okay.
right, so VC, with venture capital money, only 2 to 3% goes to women-owned businesses.
Wow.
Medical funding is only 1%.
Wow.
I know. The crazy thing is that if you invest in a female-run company at the same level that you invest in a male-owned company, you will get a 30% higher ROI.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, and of
Uh,
course, getting funded by banks. I mean, I had one of the women I interviewed. She was looking for funding to refurbish a building. By the way, she owned the building outright, had no debt, and the bank refused to give her the loan.
wow.
And it wasn't that much money. I mean, it was less than 100K. I mean, come on. Yeah.
Wow.
So she ended up doing what women do. She borrowed from friends and family, and then she negotiated with the contractor to get better terms, longer repayment. This is what women do. When you can't go the direct route, we do what we do, which is check in with our network. And women are great at creating networks. And so there's always somebody who can help you. And I was just so impressed by how resourceful these women are, in spite of meeting all these barriers. And
Right.
yeah, I mean, and she said, listen, because I can't remember if she's Chinese or Korean, but she said, if I were a white guy, I would have gotten the money. I mean, that's the reality.
Wow. Well, and I know, like, I'm a big fan of Tony Robbins, and I know Tony Robbins often talks about, if you don't, it's not about resources, it's about being resourceful,
Yes.
because it's like, so many of us don't have the resources, and it's like, and what are you gonna do about it? It's like, if you can't go in through the door, go through a window. You just have to keep going. But I think this is a great book, and I can see the mission here. So I just wanna kinda go to the writing of the book and preparing this. So, first of all, that's a lot of people that's a lot of women to coordinate schedules with. So I'm thinking this is not a book I whipped off in a weekend with that kind of,
No.
with that kind of runway. But I wanna ask you, how did you find how did you decide who to interview? And then how did you find these women? Because I'm sure you had a set criteria. So, sort of, what was your process for including these people, these women in your book?
So great question. So let me address that where I found them first of all. So like every other woman, I have an amazing network.
Mm.
I'm part of several networking groups, and I reached out to them. I said, "Look, I'm writing this book." And I thought it would take me a while. I mean, I was looking for 21 or 20. I think I started out with 20. And within a week, I had 20 people who were literally saying, "Please put me in your book." So
Wow.
that was shocking. And then the criteria was very specific. You had to have been in business at least 20 years. You had to have built at least one company. I went at first, I wasn't so as concerned about whether you were a consultant or had a full-fledged business. But I realized, more, I mean, most women, I would say, are definitely heavy on the consultant coaching, right? And so I had a lot of those. And at a certain point, I said, okay, I can't take any more because I want to see women who've actually built a business where they're supporting, where they have a staff, they have more than just themselves as the employee. So I had to turn some people away, which I was sorry.
It'd be hard.
Yeah, it was very hard. It was hard to do that. But, otherwise the book would just be literally about consultants and coaches, authors, and speakers.
Right.
And that, of course, is because one of the networking groups I went to is one that is heavy on consultants, coaches, speakers, and authors. So, um, but and then I really wanted to make sure because I have this whole focus on finance and money, and so I want to make sure that I had at least a couple people who were talking about money. And so even if they were a consultant, but they were consulting about about issues revolving around money. So this one woman who is, I can't remember, I know she's African, but I think she lives in the UK now. Yes, she does. But she was originally from Africa, and I can't remember which country. I want to say Nigeria, but I don't know if that's true. I'd have to look that up. Anyway, what she did is she built a business around helping women in Africa
Mm.
um, build a runway so they could create so they could provide for their families and communities, but build kind of wealth for their families. So I thought that was really worth looking into. I also spoke with a woman who's been disabled since she was a child because I felt, yeah, it was a fascinating story. In fact, I was just rereading her story yesterday because I go back and I'm, working on editing right now. But yeah, and what she does now, she is an advocate for parents of children who are 14 and older because that's when the wheels fall off the bus. Because once you get to a certain age, you age out of the system and you no longer have access to all these free resources. So
Right.
that was a really interesting conversation. Then, of course, we got into what it means to be not just a woman, but a woman who's disabled in a wheelchair. How are you perceived and how, that comes with its own set of challenges. Um, and then I have one woman who is kind of created a third career I think she's in her 80s. So, with,
Wide range of people.
yeah.
So with your process, did you just kind of have some email conversations? Did you get on Zoom with all of them?
Yeah, I got on Zoom. Yeah. So
Okay.
first of all, and of course, they all had to sign a waiver, that I could use their information. But yes, I each one of them I scheduled 45 minutes. Sometimes it took 20 minutes, and sometimes it was an hour and a half. Depending. but they all had the same questions. I think it was like 7 questions. Um, and, um, and then, I explored different aspects of it. And then what I did is I organized, and by the way, the interviews took 9 months, just so you know.
Wow.
Because
Okay.
it takes time to, plus I was still kind of figuring this out. And like I said, I started out thinking I was only going to do 20 or 25, and then ended up with 44. And then I thought, well, maybe I should do 50. I'm like, no, just stop now.
That would the OCD in me would say, "Yes, it must be 50, so it's even."
Right, 'cause it's got to be right. It's got to be an even number anyway. But I really wanted to make sure that I covered all the different areas. So, um, and like I said, finance was a big part of it. Then I actually had one nonprofit. And this one actually is very near and dear to my heart because you've heard of Alex's Lemonade Stand?
No, no.
So Alex's Lemonade Stand was started by a little girl who was diagnosed with a very rare kind of brain cancer. This is in Philadelphia, and Philadelphia has Children's Hospital, and the family actually moved to Philadelphia from, I think, Connecticut, so they could be at their hospital. I never met Alex because she died before we moved, but they were my neighbors, and my sons were friends with her brothers, 2 of her brothers, and so I remember literally being in the kitchen and hearing about the mom's plans to honor her daughter through creating this foundation.
Mm.
And they went from just the 2 of them, they now have 30 people, and they are the number 1 nonprofit foundation, focused on pediatric cancer
Wow.
in the country.
Wow.
And their whole goal for starting this nonprofit was to find the cure for the cancer that killed their daughter.
Wow. Wow.
It's
That's
an
amazing.
amazing story, I know.
And I'm assuming they're in the book.
Oh, yes, they are front and center. In fact, I kind of built a whole chapter around girls who are changing the world, and
Mm.
she did. She really
Mm.
changed the world. I mean, she was like 10 years old. I think she died when she was 11,
Mm.
and she single-handedly was responsible for raising, like, over $1 million in her short life
Holy cow.
through these, because she inspired all these other children to start these lemonade stands.
Mm.
Yeah, it's an amazing story, and, anyway, I just, yeah, so it got me also thinking about other girls. Anyway, so each chapter kinda has its own focus around
Right.
that is related to either girls or women, and, but, it's not just about the challenges, it's really to show how amazingly resourceful these women are. Some of them are women you've never heard of, and some of them are women you have heard of. Some of them
Right.
are women who are very successful, others who are under the radar, you don't really know about them, but they're changing lives
Right. Right.
and doing amazing things. And the more I got into these interviews, it just, it just became really a more and more of a passion project for me to bring these voices to light, to have people read about them and realize, it's like if they can do it, why not me? Right? Like
Right.
that's
Right.
kind of the whole point.
Exactly.
These are not multimillionaires because a lot of these entrepreneurship books are all like, oh, I made a $10 million and so can, it's like
Nah.
not that kind of book. It's
No.
really sharing these stories and showing, kind of the obstacles that so many women deal with, and really specifically what it's like to be a mompreneur.
Exactly. Exactly. So let me ask you, so when you're interviewing this many people, I'm trying to figure out how do you not go down the rabbit hole? Because I'm sure probably each one of them could be a book unto
Oh,
themselves.
yes.
So you said you tried to use the same questions. And then are you finding that like, okay, you do an interview, but it's like, oh my gosh, I only actually use this little bit. Like, how do you rein it in so that you just go, I have all this information. How do I drill down to what really is going to go in the book? And how do you push through that as a writer, as an author?
And by the way, doing this without AI.
Mm, okay.
So just so you know, AI is not involved in any of the writing of either book. But yeah, so the key really is I started out with what's the story I want to tell.
Mm.
Okay. So I think you need a focus. So having women, like I said, they had to have been in business at least 20 years. A lot of them had built many companies, but I only focused on the current one. But I talked about maybe that experience that went into, building this new company. Um, and I stuck pretty much to the script, and then the other thing is, and this is my favorite part, I asked each of them to give me a quote. One thing they would say to their younger self or a quote that they live by. And these are my favorite part of the book.
Mm. Mm.
They're really wonderful quotes. Yeah.
I love
And
that.
I would say one of my favorite ones is no is a complete sentence.
Mm. And that is something that I think resonates for women so much more than men. And I really have to say that I know so many women that don't feel okay about saying no, that it's like it's like I can't say no. And they say no, they say yes to everything, but not everything is in our best interest. And when we're saying yes to this, we can't say yes to that because we run out of time,
Yeah.
resources,
You know,
energy.
one of the you're bringing up such a good point, and a part of why I like this quote so much is that how much it resonates. But what I also discovered is, especially when it comes to money, because money is a huge issue for women.
Yeah.
And, I've really learned to reframe it in the sense that when I undercharge, right? So when I say yes to somebody who can't afford me, right? And instead of saying, well, when you can, I'd love to work with you, which is a perfectly reasonable thing to say, we do it anyway, knowing that we're losing money. And here's where I've kind of learned to reframe it is think about what you are doing, not just for yourself and how it's going to hurt your bottom line, but by you saying yes to that, you're making it harder for the next woman who's going to come along and want to ask her true value.
Mm. So think of yourself as being part of the team. That it's like, okay, if I can't do it for myself, I can do it for my sisters, so to
Well,
speak.
and the truth is we all win, right?
Mm.
Because there's this sense, and I do share, a story around this particular topic, but what I find so interesting is that we're so focused on feeling for other people that we forget that we're people too, right? Like, how about feeling for yourself? Like, you should know part of this too is that you need to go into any negotiation knowing exactly the number you can live with and that you are willing to walk away if you don't get that number. Like, there has to be
Right.
absolute, this is the lowest you're going to go. And it can't be so low that you're not covering your own expenses. So,
Mm.
when I was teaching a course on this, I had students literally put together their whole budget, and this was actually an interesting one because it was based on minimum wage, which they realized like this is why people can't afford to live on minimum wage because there's no money left over. But from a perspective of how do you charge, which is a huge thing, and it came up with every conversation pretty much.
Mm.
What I've discovered is that if you know, first of all, what your monthly nut has to be, and you have to cover that. And you also know the value that you bring. And one of the things I've heard from women, it's like, well, it's somehow because it comes easily to them that doesn't have value. I find that a really interesting perspective, right? And so, which is actually why when I work with my clients, and I do work primarily with women founders, although they're not startups. But when I work with women, the first thing we do is get clear on their zone of genius
Mm.
and then identify the value that it has for their clients. Because if I understand the value that I bring, I'm much less likely to undercut my prices.
I love that. I love that. So as we're kind of getting to the end of our time together. So as a close for any author who is thinking about writing a book or they're about to, publish their book, now that you kind of are such an expert on women visibility, what would you, especially for the women authors out there, men, yeah, well, we love you too, but I'm talking today to the women authors that are listening. What would you say is sort of that one bit of wisdom you'd give to them about being visible with their book?
Hmm. Well, I guess can you clarify that? Because when you say being visible with your book, I mean, that could mean lots of things. Do you mean
So sort of
there's
like
promoting
once
it?
once your book's out in the
Yeah.
world,
Oh,
continuing to say,
ah,
"Hey, this is
right.
mine. That I've done this thing."
Oh, I see. Well, first of all, launch parties, and now
Mm,
we do those online. In fact, I just attended one. And so that's and women, by the way, I think we really are a community. I mean, I have to say most women, when you ask them, they're very willing to do this. So don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to talk to your friends and families and have them organize some kind of a launch party. Libraries are a great way to get your book in people's hands. And there, in fact, I was just talking to someone the other day about there's a national conference for the American Library Association, and people just they get all these books and then they start to promote those. So don't forget about libraries because I think people don't think about them so much. And then I use LinkedIn. That's my platform of choice. I will tell you, I have used LinkedIn for the last for about a year. I was posting every week about my book, the things I was learning, some of the quotes that I was getting, takeaways, and that was a great way to build anticipation for the book.
mm,
So I had anywhere from 1,200 to 7,000 views on my post.
mm.
I do not have 7,000 connections, so I
Right.
I was really blown away, and what happens is when you post on, about specific topics within your book, you also get a sense of, "Oh, this I've really hit a nerve here."
Mm,
In fact, one of and I'll never forget this, I did, because I did polls and posts, right? The polls got a lot of views and reposts and lots of comments, and it was one of those, because I was sharing statistics about the lack of women in different aspects of corporate life, and somebody wrote in their comment, "This really sets my hair on fire."
I love that. I love that. I love that. So basically the message is don't be afraid to talk about it. Don't be
Right.
afraid. Don't be afraid to be visible.
And
It's
and
you're holding yourself back.
and what I would say is, because I know a lot of women I hear, they feel like, "Oh, I don't wanna be too salesy. I don't want to, to put this." Somehow we gotten the message that promoting is like somehow bad, but you can promote the ideas in the book.
Mm,
And when you do that, it's not about you. I mean, yes, of course, you're the author, you brought this to light. But when I was posting weekly, I was never saying, "Oh, look at all this amazing stuff that I'm doing." It was more like, "Wow, this is real. Did you know?" And here's a statistic, or
mm,
I just had this conversation and here's a takeaway from that, or from the research, because I did a whole deep dive into women in history from the latter half of the 19th century to present day. So it was women in education, women in finance, and women in the workplace. That it could be a book all by
yep.
itself.
Yep.
That was amazing. Really,
That's
truly, truly amazing.
That's great. Great advice. Thank you very much. Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show today, Orly, and sharing your author's journey with us. And we're excited for you. And for anybody who would like to get in touch with you, I'm supposing just going to LinkedIn. We'll put your LinkedIn details in the show notes. And of course, people can then connect with you, follow you, and continue to walk this author's journey with you. So thank you very much for being here today. And thank you to everybody who tuned in. And we hope that you'll join us back next week on another edition of the Easy Peasy Books podcast. Okay.
Thank you so much, Jillian. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks. Okay. Bye, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Easy Peasy Books, from author to authority. If you found value in today's episode, I'd be grateful if you could leave us a review. It helps other aspiring authors discover our podcast. To learn more about writing, publishing, and leveraging your business book, visit my website at easypeasybooks.com.